I swear, it sounded simple. Pretend to be someone's girlfriend for a week. Smile, wear a few dresses, play along. Easy money, right? That's what I thought, until I met him. Miss Carter? A man in a perfectly pressed white shirt and too serious face called my name in the port terminal. That's me, I said, dragging my pink suitcase behind me. Where's my fake boyfriend? He didn't smile. Mr. Hale is waiting on board. Follow me, please. Mr. Hale. That name already sounded expensive. When I stepped onto the ship, I swear I could smell money, like cologne, champagne, and superiority. Everyone was in designer clothes. And there I was, the hired girlfriend, wearing my best Zara. He was standing on the deck when I saw him. Tall, sharp jawline, expensive sunglasses, that effortless confidence of someone who probably owns an island. Ethan Hale. Billionaire. Tech investor. Apparently allergic to smiles. He looked at me once, from head to toe, and said flatly, "You're late." "Wow," I said, blinking. "You must be a hit at parties." His jaw tightened. "Let's get one thing straight, this is a business arrangement. No drama, no surprises, and definitely no feelings." "Perfect," I said, crossing my arms. "I'm allergic to billionaires anyway." He didn't laugh. Of course he didn't. That night, I sat across from him at dinner, pretending to be the doting girlfriend while he discussed mergers and market trends with a couple that clearly thought I was way out of his league, or maybe too into his league. "So, how did you two meet?" the woman asked, sipping her wine. I froze. We hadn't rehearsed this part. Ethan looked at me, his face unreadable. Then, without missing a beat, he said, "She spilled coffee on me during a board meeting." I blinked. Right. I was, testing his reflexes. "Failed miserably," he said. I kicked him under the table. He didn't flinch. The couple laughed, thinking we were being cute. But as soon as they turned away, Ethan leaned in and murmured, "Next time, stick to the script." "Next time, give me the script," I whispered back. He almost smiled. But then he looked away, pretending he didn't. By day 2, I'd figured out his pattern. He woke up early, worked out, checked emails, held virtual meetings, all before I even had my coffee. And when I tried to make conversation, he gave me one-word answers. "So, what's your favorite movie?" "I don't watch movies." "Favorite food?" "I eat for nutrition, not pleasure." "Wow. Must be fun at family dinners." "I don't do those either." I leaned back. "You're like a walking LinkedIn profile, you know that?" That time, he looked at me. "And you're not exactly what I expected." "Excuse me?" "You're loud. You talk too much. And you don't act like someone who needs money." "Oh, I'm sorry. Should I cry every time you hand me a paycheck?" That made him pause. Just for a second. Then he muttered, "You're impossible." "Thank you," I said, smiling sweetly. On the third night, the cruise hosted a masquerade ball. And, of course, Ethan insisted we attend, for optics. He wore a black suit, no mask. Because of course he didn't need one. I wore a red dress and a small lace mask that I may or may not have borrowed from wardrobe. When he saw me, his expression flickered, just a split second, before he said, "Try not to attract too much attention." "Too late," I said, as a waiter nearly walked into a chair staring at me. During the dance, one of his business rivals approached, a charming older man with a smirk that screamed trouble. "Ethan," he said smoothly, "and who's the stunning woman you've been hiding?" Before Ethan could respond, I smiled. I'm the reason he stopped being boring. The rival laughed. Ethan didn't. But when the man walked away, he leaned close and whispered, "You enjoy making things complicated, don't you?" "Only when I'm bored," I said. "And you're not exactly keeping me entertained." That's when he surprised me. He took my hand and pulled me closer. Then let's change that. For the first time, his eyes softened, the same eyes that had been cold and calculating since the moment we met. And I swear, for 1 second, I forgot it was all fake. Then the moment broke. He let go. Back to business. Back to walls. Good performance, he said quietly. You almost looked like you meant it. Oh, I did, I said, but only for the paycheck. He smirked, just a hint of one. Keep telling yourself that. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the ocean. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at me, like I'd thrown him off his own game. He wasn't my type. Too controlled. Too cold. But under all that, there was something. And for the first time since I signed that contract, I had a bad feeling. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure who was acting anymore. The next morning, I found him on the upper deck, drinking black coffee and staring at the ocean like it had personally offended him. He greeted me with a short good morning that sounded more like a business memo. I asked if he ever smiled before noon, and he said only if the stock market was up. I told him I'd try to make that happen. He didn't even blink. I sat across from him anyway. I'd stopped caring about his personal space. If I was going to play the perfect girlfriend for a week, I might as well annoy him professionally. I asked what kind of woman he usually dated. He said none of your business. I said so, high maintenance and emotionally unavailable, got it. He didn't deny it. For a man who claimed to be logical, he sure spent a lot of time staring at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Later that day, we had a photo shoot arranged, part of his public image campaign. Apparently, his company's investors wanted to see that he could connect emotionally. Which was hilarious, considering he barely connected with actual humans. The photographer told us to get closer, said we looked too stiff. I teased that maybe he should smile, and Ethan muttered that he wasn't built for smiling on command. I told him he should try, his face might just survive it. He turned his head toward me, that small, dangerous glint in his eyes. Then, suddenly, he leaned closer and brushed his hand over mine, just for the camera, but his touch sent a spark straight through me. The photographer said perfect, but my heart was doing backflips. Afterward, Ethan told me not to overthink it. I told him he wasn't that unforgettable. He said he hoped not. And yet, neither of us moved away. We walked through the ship's corridors in silence until he finally spoke again, said he appreciated that I'd handled the dinner last night better than expected. I told him he sounded almost human. He said not to push it. I laughed, and for the first time, he didn't roll his eyes. That night, there was a storm. Not the dramatic, movie-type one, just heavy rain and waves big enough to make the ship sway. Ethan had been pacing in his suite, talking on his phone about some merger that apparently couldn't wait. I sat on the couch, pretending to scroll my phone, listening to the sharp edge in his voice. When he hung up, he looked exhausted. I asked if everything was okay. He said it was fine, which obviously meant it wasn't. So I told him he could talk about it if he wanted. He said he didn't mix business with fake relationships. I said, good, because I don't mix empathy with contracts either. That made him stop. He stared at me for a moment, like he wasn't used to people talking back to him. He said most people didn't argue with him. I told him most people were probably scared of losing their paycheck. He asked if I was scared. I told him no, I already got my advance. He almost smiled. Almost. The next day, the cruise docked on a small private island. Sun, sand, and a bunch of rich people pretending to relax. We had to attend a brunch event. I wore a light dress, he wore the same expression he always did, I'd rather be anywhere else. Halfway through, one of the guests, a tall woman with perfect hair and too much perfume, walked up and hugged him like she owned him. She introduced herself as Vanessa, said she and Ethan had a history. Judging by the way he didn't deny it, I guessed history was an understatement. Vanessa turned to me with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She said I didn't look like his usual type. I said he didn't look like mine either. Ethan choked on his drink. After she left, he muttered that I didn't have to provoke her. I said she started it. He said I was impossible. I told him he was predictable. He didn't reply. But the muscle in his jaw twitched, and I couldn't help smiling. Later, when the guests were gone, he asked if I'd done it on purpose, acted jealous to make it look real. I said maybe a little. He said it was convincing. I told him maybe it wasn't acting. He looked at me then, that slow, careful kind of look, the one that felt like a question. But instead of answering, he just said we should keep things professional. I said sure, Mr. Professional, and walked away before he could see the stupid grin I was trying to hide. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about the way he looked at me when I said maybe it wasn't acting. Like he didn't know what to do with that. Somewhere between pretending and not pretending, the lines were starting to blur. The next morning, something changed. He was different, quieter, distracted. He didn't make sarcastic comments at breakfast. He didn't even complain about my choice of pancakes over nutrient-balanced meals. I asked what was wrong. He said we needed to talk later. Those 4 words always mean trouble. He said the situation had changed, that there were things about the contract I didn't know. I asked what kind of things. He said we'd discuss it tonight, privately. Then he left before I could ask more. I told myself I didn't care. That whatever change he meant couldn't possibly matter. But it did. Because suddenly, every moment, every look, every sarcastic line, felt like it was leading to something I wasn't ready for. And I hated that my heart seemed one step ahead of my head. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned gold, he knocked on my cabin door. He looked serious, like a man carrying a secret. He said there was a reason he'd needed a fake girlfriend, something more personal than he'd admitted. I asked what he meant. He said his family was on board. And they didn't know about the contract. He said his family was on board, and my brain froze. Not investors. Not reporters. Family. I asked if by family he meant distant cousins he barely knew. He said no, his parents, his sister, and her husband. The kind of people who remembered your childhood haircut and used it as blackmail at every family dinner. I told him that would have been good to know before I signed the contract. He said he hadn't planned on them joining the cruise, they'd surprised him. I said, great, now I have to surprise them too. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. It was the first time I'd seen him like that, not annoyed, not cold, just human. He said he understood if I wanted to back out. I told him that wasn't an option. If I ran now, it would look suspicious, and besides, I never walked away from a challenge. He said it wasn't a challenge. I said everything's a challenge when your fake boyfriend's mother might hug you. He sighed. I smiled. And that was that. We met his family the next morning at breakfast. His mother, elegant and soft-spoken, hugged me before I could react. She said she'd heard so much about me. I smiled and said I'd heard less. Ethan glared at me across the table. His father shook my hand with that firm, assessing grip men use when they're silently saying prove yourself. His sister, Claire, was already grinning like she knew the whole story and was enjoying every second of it. I could tell immediately that she didn't buy it. She said I didn't seem like her brother's usual type. I said I'd take that as a compliment. Ethan kicked me gently under the table. His father asked how long we'd been dating. I looked at Ethan. He said 6 months. I said 7. We both froze. Claire raised an eyebrow. He said I was counting from our first date. I said nice save. His mom thought it was adorable. Adorable wasn't exactly the look we were going for, but I'd take it. After breakfast, I told him he could have warned me about how intimidating his parents were. He said they were harmless. I told him his father looked like he could run a navy. He said I'd done fine. I said I always do fine. He said I was infuriatingly confident. I said it was part of my charm. He didn't disagree. Later that day, his mother invited me to a small family dinner, just us, she said, smiling sweetly. Ethan looked like he wanted to jump overboard. I asked what was wrong. He said his mother loved interrogating people. I said, so basically, dinner with a lie detector. He didn't laugh. At dinner, his mother asked how we'd met. I told her the coffee story Ethan had invented earlier, but added that he'd apologized by sending flowers. Ethan almost choked on his wine. His mother melted at that. Said it was sweet. I said he had his moments. Ethan muttered that I was making things up as I went. I said that was half the job description. His father asked if we'd talked about the future. I said I was living in the moment. Ethan said we were taking things slow. His mother clasped her hands together and said we looked happy. I almost laughed. After dinner, when we finally escaped, I told Ethan he should thank me for saving his image. He said I'd nearly given his mother a heart attack. I said she seemed to like me more than him. He said that wasn't hard. For a man who supposedly didn't do emotions, he sure had a lot of them hiding under sarcasm. That night, the ship hosted a late deck party. I went, mostly to unwind. Music, lights, ocean breeze, it almost felt like a normal vacation. Ethan showed up later, still in that crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking annoyingly perfect. He said he didn't like crowds. I said I didn't like uptight billionaires, yet here we were. He said I was impossible. I told him he said that a lot. He said maybe because it was true. I told him maybe he liked that. He didn't answer. But he didn't leave either. We stood by the railing, the sea stretching out forever, lights flickering across the waves. It was quiet, and for a second, neither of us were pretending. He said his parents liked me. I said of course they did, I was delightful. He said I was also reckless. I said those two things weren't mutually exclusive. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said I made things feel lighter. I asked if that was a compliment. He said maybe. I told him I'd take it. Later, when most of the guests had gone to bed, we stayed on the deck. He told me a story about his childhood, how his father used to push him to be perfect, to never show weakness. He said that's why he didn't believe in relationships, they always ended up being leverage. I told him not everyone was trying to use him. He said you were. That one hit harder than I expected. I told him he wasn't wrong, but I didn't plan on liking him as much as I did. He looked at me like he didn't believe it, or maybe like he didn't want to. He said I was playing a dangerous game. I said maybe he was the one losing. The wind picked up, the waves shimmered under the moonlight, and suddenly the space between us felt too small. He said I should go get some rest. I said he should stop giving orders. He said he wasn't giving an order, just trying to be careful. I said careful was boring. He said I was trouble. I told him he liked trouble. He didn't argue. When I got back to my cabin, my heart wouldn't slow down. I told myself it was just the game, the act, the pretense. But when I looked in the mirror, I realized something had changed. It wasn't just fake anymore. The next morning, he avoided me. No texts, no breakfast together, no sarcastic comments. It was like he'd decided to rebuild the wall overnight. When I finally cornered him by the elevators, I asked what was going on. He said we were getting too close. I said maybe that was the point. He said no, that wasn't in the contract. I told him neither were feelings, but here we were. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, that same look from the deck, the one that made everything too real, and said we needed to finish the week, play the roles, and then end it cleanly. I told him fine. But I also told him he was lying to both of us. He said he didn't lie. I said, then maybe you're just pretending better than I am. And I walked away before he could prove me wrong. For 2 whole days, we barely spoke. It was like someone had drawn an invisible line between us, neat, clean, and unbreakable. He'd gone back to being that version of himself, the one who calculated feelings like numbers, who thought silence could solve everything. And me? I pretended I didn't care. Smiled for the cameras, played the part, laughed at the right moments. I was back to being his contract, not his connection. Until the rumor started. It was morning, the sea was calm, and I was sipping orange juice on the deck when Claire, his sister, appeared out of nowhere, all sunshine and suspicion. She sat beside me, crossed her legs, and said in that casual but not casual tone. "So, I heard something interesting." I smiled, pretending I had no idea what she was talking about. "Oh? I love gossip. Go on." She tilted her head, studying me. "Someone said you're not really who you say you are." My stomach dropped, but I managed to laugh. "What, you think I'm a secret agent or something?" Claire leaned in a little closer. "They said you're an actress." I froze for half a second. Just half. Then I said, "Well, that would explain my dramatic eyeliner." She didn't laugh. "Ethan doesn't usually date performers." I shrugged. Maybe that's why I'm the exception. But I could tell she didn't buy it. She smiled, that kind of smile people use when they already know the answer and just want to watch you squirm. Then she stood up, wished me a lovely day, and left, just like that. I found Ethan later in one of the lounges, staring at his laptop like it owed him money. I didn't bother with greetings. "You told your family about the contract, didn't you?" He looked up, frowning. "Of course not." "Then how does your sister know I'm an actress?" He closed the laptop slowly. "She doesn't. She's guessing." "Well, her guesses are getting really specific," I said. "She basically described my resume." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'll handle it." "Handle it?" I repeated. "You mean lie better?" He looked at me sharply. "That's rich, coming from you." I laughed under my breath. "Right. Because this whole thing was my brilliant idea." He said nothing, just clenched his jaw and looked away. Later that day, during lunch with his parents, the tension felt thick enough to slice with a butter knife. His mother kept giving me those gentle, searching looks, the kind that said, "I want to believe you, but something's off." His father, on the other hand, looked like he was conducting an interrogation with his eyes. At one point, Claire asked me about my job back home. I said I worked in marketing. She asked what company. I said a small agency. She said, "What's it called?" And that's when Ethan cut in, smoothly saying we'd just started a new project together and hadn't decided whether to go public yet. His mother looked impressed. Claire looked suspicious. After lunch, I told him that was the worst cover story I'd ever heard. He said it worked. I said for now. He told me not to worry. I told him I wasn't worried, I was furious. He said I was overreacting. I said maybe, but at least I'm reacting to something other than spreadsheets. That one earned me silence. A long one. That evening, there was a formal dinner. Big, glamorous, way too many sequins. I wore black, simple, classic, unplanned revenge chic. When Ethan saw me, he paused for a moment. He didn't say anything, but his eyes did. He said, "Don't look so good when I'm trying to ignore you." Halfway through dinner, a guest, someone from Ethan's company, apparently, made a joke about hiring girlfriends to boost image. The whole table laughed. I didn't. Neither did Ethan. He looked at the guy and said, calmly but coldly, "Some people actually find connection, not contracts." I turned to him, surprised. He didn't look at me. But under the table, his hand brushed mine, just slightly. And suddenly, all the noise around us faded. After dinner, I cornered him on the deck. "You didn't have to defend me," I said. He said he wasn't defending me, just clarifying. I told him he was terrible at lying for someone who claims to be so good at control. He said he didn't like people talking about me that way. I said why not, it's just business, remember? He didn't reply. Just looked at me for a long time, eyes searching, like he was trying to solve a problem that didn't have an equation. Finally, he said I made things complicated. I said maybe life's better that way. He said maybe I didn't understand how much was at stake for him. I said maybe he didn't understand that I wasn't made of stone. Then I walked away before he could see the tears I refused to let fall. The next morning, the rumor had spread further. Apparently, half the ship now believed I was an actress, and not the good kind. Some said gold digger, some said social climber. Ethan found me near the pool deck, staring at the ocean. He said he was sorry. I told him he didn't owe me that. He said he hated that this was hurting me. I said it's not hurting me, it's just embarrassing. He said he'd talk to them, fix it, make a statement. I told him no, that would only make it worse. He asked what I wanted him to do. I said nothing. Then I added, maybe just believe me when I say I didn't sign up to feel like this. He looked at me then, really looked, and said quietly that maybe he hadn't signed up for it either. That night, I saw him again at the piano lounge. He was alone, a glass of whiskey in front of him, the lights low. He looked tired, not business tired, but soul tired. He said I shouldn't be there. I said I wasn't there for him. He said good, but his eyes said otherwise. Then he asked, softly, if I ever regretted taking the deal. I said sometimes. He asked when. I said usually right before I start missing you. He looked down, ran a hand through his hair, and said that wasn't supposed to happen. I said tell that to whoever wrote the contract. He laughed, really laughed this time, low, rough, unguarded. And just like that, the wall cracked again. The last day of the cruise arrived too fast. Ethan said we needed to finish the week strong. I told him I was already exhausted from pretending. He said it's not pretending anymore. I laughed. Nice try. You've been saying that since day one. He said maybe it was finally true. That morning, we had to attend the farewell brunch with all the guests and, of course, his family. His parents smiled at me warmly. His sister looked smug, like she had been waiting for this exact moment to see if we'd survive. Halfway through, a small commotion started at the other end of the room. Someone whispered, and soon Ethan's investors were asking questions, pointing fingers, exchanging knowing glances. I realized immediately, the rumor had spread farther than I thought. Ethan noticed my panic. He said we'd handle it together. I said I already handled it, by ignoring it. He said ignoring doesn't always work. I told him maybe he should have taught me the perfect billionaire response. He said perfect responses are overrated. And for the first time, he didn't try to act untouchable. After brunch, we escaped to the upper deck. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, waves reflecting the morning sun. I asked if he ever regretted hiring me. He said no. I laughed, sarcastic but nervous. Really? Not even once? He said maybe once or twice, when I nearly drove him crazy. I said that made two of us. He didn't reply immediately. Then he said quietly that I'd done more than just act, I'd made him see people differently. I told him that was dangerous. He said maybe that was the point. Later, as the ship prepared to dock, Ethan finally stopped avoiding me. He said he needed to confess something that had been building since the first day. I told him go on, I'm all ears. He said he had started this contract thinking it was just a game. A business move. A distraction. But somewhere in the chaos, he realized he didn't just like the act, he liked me. I told him that's risky talk when the whole cruise is watching. He said he didn't care anymore. I laughed nervously. So, what, you're breaking the rules? He said yes, and that he wanted to know if I felt the same. I hesitated. I told him I had kept a wall up, too, because it was safer that way. He said walls were overrated. The last night, the captain's farewell party lit the deck with strings of golden lights. Everyone danced, laughed, and took photos, the perfect ending to a week-long charade. I stood by the railing, trying to soak it all in without panicking. Ethan approached silently. He didn't grab my hand, didn't say anything. He just stood beside me, and for the first time, neither of us had to pretend. He said he didn't want this week to end, not just because of appearances, but because he couldn't imagine pretending anymore. I said I felt the same way, though I tried to mask it with a joke. He laughed. That laugh, real, unguarded, made my chest ache. He said he didn't know if we could go back to normal after this week. I said maybe we shouldn't. He looked at me then, eyes searching mine. He said he didn't care what the contract said. He only cared about us. I told him us was terrifying. He said terrifying could be fun. The ship docked. Families hugged, guests waved goodbye, cameras flashed. And in the middle of the chaos, Ethan and I found a quiet corner, a sliver of space just for us. He said we should talk about what comes next. I told him maybe we should stop pretending. He said maybe we already have. And then, finally, he kissed me, slow, teasing, with that perfect balance of challenge and warmth. I told him don't get used to this. He said too late. By the time we stepped off the ship, the contract was over, the rumors were still swirling, and the world was back to normal. Except for us. Ethan said he'd call me later, not as a boss, not as a client, but as himself. I said I'd hold him to that. He smirked, that same infuriating, magnetic smirk from day one. He said maybe he'd see me sooner. I told him don't push your luck. He winked. And just like that, everything we'd acted out, everything we'd pretended, everything we'd fought through, it all felt like it had been real. Because in the end, the rules didn't matter. Not the contract, not the rumors, not even the expectations. What mattered was the spark that refused to die, the spark that started as a game and ended as something neither of us could walk away from.